build more houses and ban non-resident buyers, and then we might actually solve some of our problems.
Peeni Henare, 5-minute call, Labour.
Tēnā koe te māngai o te whare. Look, I thought about speaking on this tax bill in te reo Māori, just to liven up the debate this afternoon and certainly spike the interest of members across the House. But in order to allow the translators to hopefully get away early this evening, I'm going to stick to English. Sir, when I think about a tax regime or a tax system, we want to make sure that it's fair, we want to make sure that it's transparent, and we also want to make sure that it's easy to understand, so that your Māori, from Māori trusts to small to medium enterprise business owners to the large corporates, have a system that they're able to navigate and understand, one that doesn't cost exorbitant accountancy fees, advisor fees, to make sure that they're compliant. So, sir, when I think about this particular, the taxation bill we're debating this afternoon, there are some questions that still remain unanswered. I'm familiar with some of the people who are far more smarter than me on tax matters have contacted me to once again express just how concerned they were that throughout this process they weren't given ample time, the opportunity to make sure they go through this particular bill with a fine-tooth comb, to make sure that loopholes don't emerge later on, are exploited, to make sure that this is done so that we're not coming back time and time again, as we've seen with this government, back into this House to fix things up. Sir, during the course of this bill, I spoke about the Māori trust regime and the new proposed Māori trust regime around grandparenting, Māori trust, etc. Sir, and I just want to touch on my point I made during an earlier contribution around the 3 May 2016. And I mentioned that there have been significant settlements post 3 May 2016, and my discussions with those people they've raised concerns and issues about the high compliance cost to essentially achieve the same thing that was already there before the change. And it's that kind of feedback, sir, that make me question exactly why we've done this when we're going to get the same result, yet we're making compliance a burden on Māori trusts, sir. And in a discussion with Mr Nash here, we're all for making sure that compliance costs come down, that that regulation and compliance costs aren't an extreme burden on small businesses, Māori trusts and large organisations. While adhering to the law, we want to make sure that a lot of their money isn't tied up in matters of compliance. And I highlighted in a previous contribution that sadly that won't be the case for many of the regimes, the Māori trusts that will be established post-2016. And as the Māori economy grows larger, sir, and the likes of Ngāti Whātua are coming into large assets, and they're having to set up more and more companies to work with their assets and to make sure that they're financially compliant and also fiscally responsible. They raise concerns with me. Sir, one of the issues, sir, and it's been raised by numerous contributors throughout this bill, are around some of the problems we're seeing in the country at the moment around poverty, and making sure that the distribution of taxes, and for those who have to pay tax, well, all of us have to pay tax, but for those who do pay tax, that they're seeing a return for their taxes. They're seeing reduced numbers in homelessness and all those issues that have already been raised. My colleague Julianne Genta mentioned some of them, sir, and it made me a little bit concerned when at the beginning of the third reading of this bill the Minister didn't even mention the tax rate. And in fact, all of the contributions from the other side of the House have been very minimal. And that makes me concerned for the process of this bill and, of course, for the process of democracy, sir. However, having said all of that, we will be supporting this bill, and I do hope that we won't be coming back to fix up some of the loopholes discovered later on. Kia ora, sir.
Jamie Lee Ross.